Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat malam. Kita hadir lagi di sesi OPEReT Membaca. Yang keberapa ya sekarang ya? Pokoknya kalau nggak salah ini dimulai dari awal Januari, jadi mungkin ini sudah yang keenam. Dan buku yang masih kita baca malam ini adalah The Life Changing. Sebentar ya, dibuka dulu bukunya. The life-changing magic of tidying up, the Japanese art of decluttering and organizing. Malam ini saya nge-host sendirian karena Tante Lovely tidak bisa hadir, sedang sakit, nggak apa-apa. Mudah-mudahan nanti kalau misalnya ada yang mau menonton ulang live stream ini bisa dinikmati dengan baik. Karena bukunya dalam bahasa Inggris, jadi akan saya bacakan dan di akhir setiap subbab nanti kita akan bahas sedikit tentang apa sih isi dari bab tersebut dan apa yang menarik yang ada di sana. Jadi minggu lalu kita sudah berbicara tentang pakaian. Apa sih pakaian? Kenapa kita mulai beberes di rumah itu dengan pakaian? Dan apa namanya? Dan pakaian di rumah tuh ternyata bisa banyak banget, ternyata sampai ratusan atau bahkan ribuan kalau misalnya kita orang-orang yang hobinya menumpuk baju tanpa membuang-buangnya. Dan dari pakaian itu kita akan berpindah ke tahap yang kedua, yaitu buku. Jadi kita masih ada di bab yang ketiga, yaitu tidying by category works like magic, atau beberes berdasarkan kategori. Itu sangat berguna, seperti ajaib banget pokoknya. Dan karena kita sudah dari baju, kemudian sampai ke kaos kaki, sampai ke seasonal clothes, sekarang kita ada di storing books. Oke. Oh, ada yang masuk. Oh, belum masuk kayaknya. Sip, sip. Selamat datang kepada Ibu Yanti. Wah, asik. Ada yang menemani akhirnya. Ya, langsung aja ya. Kita menuju ke bukunya. Kalau misalnya teman-teman dari OPEReT ingin mendapatkan bukunya lagi, silahkan tanyakan di grup. Nanti mungkin akan saya bantu re-upload gitu ya. Jadi sekarang kita tentang storing books, atau bagaimana cara menyimpan buku-buku kita. Subbab pertama, put all your books on the floor. Simpan semua buku kita di atas lantai. Once you have finished, ini adalah halaman ke-66 kalau misalnya menggunakan PDF-nya. Jadi silahkan untuk teman-teman yang ingin mengikuti sambil saya membacakan, pergi saja langsung ke halaman 66. Once you have finished organizing and storing your clothes, it's time to move on to books. Books are one of three things that people find hardest to let go. Many people say that books are one thing they just can't part with, regardless of whether they are avid readers or not. But the real problem is actually the way in which they part with them. One of my clients, a woman in her 30s who worked for a foreign consulting firm, loved books. She had read not only every business book, but also a broad range of novels and manga. Naturally, her room was filled with books. She had three large ceiling-height bookshelves full of books, plus about 20 waist-high towers of books piled precariously on the floor. When walking through the room, I had to sidestep and twist to avoid bumping into them. I said to her what I say to all my clients: please start by removing every book from your shelves and putting them all on the floor. Her eyes grew round. All of them? There's an awful lot. Yes, I know. All of them, please. But she hesitated for a moment as though searching for words before continuing. Wouldn't it be easier to choose them while they're still on the shelf and I can see the titles? Titles, yeah, judul. Books are usually arranged in rows in bookcases so that their titles are clearly visible. So it does seem to make more sense to weed out those you don't want when you can see them. Not only that, but books are heavy. Taking them all off the shelf only to put them back on again seems like a waste of effort. Even so, do not skip this step. Remove all the books from your bookcases. You cannot judge whether or not a book really grabs you when it's still on the shelf. Like clothes or any other belongings, books that have been left untouched on the shelf for a long time are dormant. Or perhaps I should say they're invisible. Although in plain sight, they remain unseen, just like a praying mantis, still in the grass, merging with its surroundings. Have you ever experienced the jolt of surprise when you suddenly notice it is there? If you ask yourself, does this spark joy when you are just looking at the things on your shelves or in your drawers, the question won't mean much to you. To truly decide whether you want to keep something or to dispose of it, you must take your things out of hibernation. Even the piles of books already on the floor will be easier to assess if you move them to a different part of the floor or restack them. Just like the gentle shake we use to wake someone up, we can stimulate our belongings by physically moving them, exposing them to fresh air, and making them conscious. While helping my clients tidy their homes or offices, I stand in front of the mound of books they have piled on the floor and clap my hands. Or I gently stroke the book covers. Although my clients look at me strangely at first, they are inevitably surprised at how quickly and precisely they are able to choose after this. They can see exactly what they need and don't need. It is much harder to choose books when they are still on the shelf, which means you will have to repeat the process later. If there are too many books to arrange on the floor all at one time, I ask my clients to divide them into four broad categories. The first one is general, books we read for pleasure. The second one is practical. It is the books for references, cookbooks, receipts, etc. The third is for visuals like photograph collections, etc. And the last part is magazines. Once you have piled your books, take them in your hand one by one and decide whether you want to keep or discard one. The criterion is, of course, whether or not it gives you thrill of pleasure when you touch it. Remember, I said when you touch it. Make sure you don't start reading it. Reading clouds your judgment. Instead of asking yourself what you feel, you'll start asking whether you need that book or not. Imagine what it would be like to have a bookshelf filled only with books that you really love. Isn't that image spellbinding? For someone who loves books, what greater happiness could that be? Could there be? Oke, itu adalah subbab kita yang pertama. Jadi, di sini disebutkan kalau misalnya kita tuh perlu beberes buku, bukan dengan milih buku dari raknya, tapi semuanya disebar dulu di lantai. Karena kita perlu memutuskan setelah kita menyentuh bukunya. Penekanan di sini adalah di kata menyentuh, jadi bukunya kita sentuh tuh satu persatu, kita sayang gitu ya. Bukan dibaca, karena kalau dibaca nanti kita mulai bertanya-tanya, wah kita perlu nggak ya buku ini? Kayaknya ini bermanfaat nih gitu. Kalau misalnya sudah berpikir seperti itu, biasanya itu bakalan mengeruhkan penilaian kita terhadap apakah buku ini tuh mendatangkan rasa gembira yang meluap-luap dari diri kita atau enggak. Dan itulah yang menyebabkan nanti kegiatan itu jadi harus diulang lagi seperti itu. Makanya katanya untuk orang yang sangat suka membaca, orang yang sangat suka buku, apa kebahagiaan yang bisa lebih besar daripada melihat satu rak buku penuh dengan buku-buku yang betul-betul mereka sayang gitu. Gimana kalau teman-teman, ada nggak buku yang benar-benar disayang bukan karena isinya kira-kira bakalan berguna atau enggak gitu, tapi ya disayang aja gitu. Nggak, minum dulu ya. Si ibu ketawa. Nggak ada di sini, lagi mute, tapi berhubung ibu di sebelah jadi I heard it. Oke, ini lagi mindahin mic biar siapa tahu suaranya lebih jelas. Nah, sekarang kita ke bab kedua tentang unread books atau buku yang tidak pernah kita baca. Sometime means never. Kadang-kadang itu artinya nggak pernah. The most common reason for not discarding a book is I might read it again. Take a moment to count the number of favorite books that you have actually read more than once. How many are there? For some, it may be as few as 5, while for some exceptional readers, it may be as many as 100. People who reread that many, however, are usually people in specific professions, such as scholars, or and others. Very rarely will you find ordinary people like me who read so many books. Let's face it, in the end, you are going to read very few of your books again. As with clothing, we need to stop and think about what purpose these books serve. Books are essentially paper, sheets of paper printed with letters and bound together. Their true purpose is to be read, to convey the information to their readers. It's the information they contain that has meaning. There's no meaning in their just being on your shelves. You read books for the experience of reading. Books you have read have already been experienced and their content is inside you, even if you don't remember. So, when deciding which books to keep, forget about whether you think you'll read it again or whether you've mastered what's inside. Instead, take each book in your hand and decide whether it moves you or not. Keep only those books that will make you happy just to see them on your shelves, the ones that you really love. That includes this book too. If you don't feel any joy when you hold it in your hand, I would rather you discard it. Jadi dia lagi ngomongin tentang bukunya sendiri, tapi kan kita lagi ada di PDF ya, jadi nanti kita lihat lah. What about books that you have started but not yet finished reading? Or books you bought but have not yet started? What should be done with books like this that you intend to read sometime? The internet has made it easy to purchase books, but as a consequence, it seems to me that people have far more unread books than they once did, ranging from 3 to more than 40. It is not uncommon for people to purchase a book and then buy another one not long after before they have read the first one. Unread books accumulate. The problem with books that we intend to read sometime is that they are far harder to part with than the ones we have already read. I remember one incident where I was giving a lesson to a CEO on how to clean his office. His bookshelves were filled with difficult sounding titles that you might expect a company president to read, such as classics by authors like Drucker or Carnegie, as well as the latest bestsellers. It was like walking into a bookstore. When I saw his collection, I had a sinking feeling. Sure enough, when he began sorting them, he put one book after another on his to keep pile, announcing that they were still unread. By the time he finished, he still had 50 volumes and had barely made a dent in the original collection. When I asked why he kept them, he gave the classic answer from my list of most probable answers. Because I might want to read it sometime. I'm afraid that from personal experience, I can tell you right now, sometime never comes. If you missed your chance to read a particular book, even if it was recommended for you to you or it's one you have been intending to read for ages, this is your chance to let it go. Let it go. You may have wanted to read it when you bought it, but if you haven't read it by now, the book's purpose was to teach you that you didn't need it. There's no need to finish reading books that you only got halfway through. Their purpose was to be read halfway. So get rid of all those unread books. It will be far better for you to read the book that really grabs you right now than one that you left to gather dust for years. People with large book collections are almost always diligent learners. This is why it's not unusual to see many references and study guides in my clients' bookcases. Those most commonly left unread in Japan are English textbooks, practical English conversation handbooks for travelers, and useful business English phrase books. Handbooks and guides for acquiring qualifications are often incredibly diverse, ranging from bookkeeping, real estate, and computer qualifications to aromatherapy, and color coordinating. Sometimes I'm amazed at the type of qualifications my clients are interested in. Many of my clients also keep their old textbooks all the way back to junior high and notebooks for practicing writing skills. So, if, like many of my clients, you have any books that fall into this category, I urge you to stop insisting that you will use them someday. Get rid of them today. Why? Because the odds are very low that you'll ever read them. Of all my clients, less than 15% put such books to use. When they explain why they hang on to them, their answers are all about what they intend to do someday. I'd like to study this someday. I'll study it when I have a little more time. I thought it would be useful to master English. I wanted to study bookkeeping because I'm in management. If you haven't done what you intended to do yet, donate or recycle that book. Only by discarding it will you be able to test how passionate you are about that subject. If your feelings don't change after discarding it, then you're fine as is. If you want the book so badly after getting rid of it that you're willing to buy another copy, then buy one. And this time, read and study it. Nah, ini tentang buku-buku yang katanya sih entaran bakalan kita baca, entar bakalan kita pelajari gitu ya. Tapi menurut pengalaman Marie Kondo ini, nanti itu nggak akan pernah datang, tidak akan pernah datang. Bahkan yaitu kalau misalnya kita ada buku yang kayaknya tuh baru kita baca setengah gitu ya, ternyata sampai kapanpun ya udah itu bakalan cuma terbaca setengah itu. Malah banyak dari kliennya dan saya juga sih sebenarnya yang apa namanya, yang terus-menerus malah menumpuk buku-buku textbook dari zaman SD, bukan SD sih katanya, dari zaman SMP gitu. Kayak sayang gitu kalau dibuang. Kalau misalnya itu buku tulis, masih ada sisa yang bisa untuk coret-coret atau buat latihan nulis cantik gitu ya. Tapi ternyata itu, ya it has done its purpose gitu ya. Jadi tujuannya kita mendapatkan, memiliki, dan menggunakan buku itu tuh sudah selesai. Karena buku itu tuh sebetulnya cuma tulisan hitam di atas putih, yang berguna itu kan informasi di dalamnya. Dan kalau misalnya kita berpikir, suatu hari nanti aku akan mempelajari ini, kemungkinan itu nggak bakal. Dan bahkan act atau tindakan kita untuk menyingkirkan buku-buku ini tuh, itu bakalan ngetes seberapa besar sih hasrat kita untuk belajar suatu topik tertentu. Jadi kalau misalnya si buku itu pas setelah kita buang buku itu, buang lagi ya, mungkin dikasihin atau dikirim atau diloak gitu ya. Setelah kita mengeluarkan buku itu dari tempat kita, lalu kita biasa-biasa aja, itu berarti kita tidak terlalu ingin belajar subjek itu sebenarnya. Tapi kalau misalnya setelah membuang buku itu, kita lalu berpikir, aduh, buku ini tuh bermanfaat banget padahal, ayo beli lagi deh. Nah, kalau misalnya kita sampai berpikir seperti itu, berarti kita betul-betul ingin belajar subjek tersebut, dan kali ini kita perlu baca bukunya, bukan dibuang. Nah, kayak gitu sih isi dari subbab ini gitu ya. Tadi kan kita berbicara soal buku-buku yang tidak dibaca. Nah, sekarang kita akan berbicara tentang bagaimana sih caranya memilih buku-buku untuk disimpan. Ini halaman ke-70, judulnya Books to Keep, Those That Belong in the Hall of Fame. I now keep my collection of books to about 30 volumes at any one time, but in the past I found it very hard to discard books because I love them. The first time I sorted through my library using the yardstick of whether or not they gave me joy, I had about 100 volumes left in my bookcase. Although this is not excessive compared to the average, I felt that I could still reduce. One day I decided to take a closer look at what I had. I started with books that I considered taboo to discard. In my case, first on the list was Alice in Wonderland, which I have read repeatedly since grade 1. Books like this, which fall into one's personal book hall of fame, are simple to identify. Next, I looked at the books that inspired pleasure but didn't quite make it into the Hall of Fame. As time passes, the content of this category naturally changes, but these books are the ones I definitely want to keep right now. At that time, one of these was The Art of Discarding, which first opened my eyes to tidying, although I no longer have it. Books that provide this degree of pleasure are also fine to keep. The most difficult ones are those that give you moderate pleasure, those with words and phrases that moved your heart and that you might want to read again. These are the hardest to discard. Although I felt no pressure to get rid of them, I could not overlook the fact that they only gave me moderate pleasure, particularly not when I was pursuing perfection in the field of tidying. I began to search for a way to let them go without regret and eventually hit upon what I called the bulk reduction method. Realizing that what I really wanted to keep was not the book but certain information or specific words it contained, I decided that if I kept only what was necessary, I should be able to part with the rest. My idea was to copy the sentences that inspired me into a notebook. Over time, I thought this would become a personal collection of my favorite words of wisdom. It might be fun to read it over in the future and trace the path my interests had led me. With great excitement, I pulled out notebook I liked and launched my project. I began by underlining the places I wanted to copy, then I wrote the title in my notebook and began transcribing. Once I started, however, I realized that this process was far too much work. It takes time to transcribe, and if I was going to be able to read those words in the future, my handwriting had to be neat. To copy 10 quotations from one single book would take at least half an hour, and that was a low estimate. The thought of doing this for 40 books made me dizzy. My next plan was to use a copy machine. I would copy the sections I wanted to keep and cut and paste them into the notebook. This, I thought, should be much quicker and easier. But when I tried it, it was even more work. I finally decided to rip the relevant page out of the book. Pasting pages into a notebook was also a pain, so I simplified the process by slipping them into a file instead. This only took 5 minutes per book, and I managed to get rid of 40 books and keep the words that I liked. I was extremely pleased with the results. 2 years after launching this bulk reduction method, I had a sudden flash of realization. I had never once looked at the file I created. All that effort had just been to ease my own conscience. Recently, I have noticed that having fewer books actually increases the impact of the information I read. I recognize necessary information much more easily. Many of my clients, particularly those who have disposed of a substantial number of books and papers, have also mentioned this. For books, timing is everything. The moment you first encounter a particular book is the right time to read it. To avoid missing that moment, I recommend that you keep your collection small. Oke, ini keseluruhan subbab ini bicara tentang buku-buku yang bisa kita simpan. Itu tuh kayak gimana sih? Nah, kebanyakan buku-buku itu adalah buku yang membuat kita merasa sangat-sangat senang, yang bahkan sejak masa kecil pun sudah kita baca berulang kali gitu ya. Kemudian yang kedua itu adalah buku yang kurang lebih memang membuat kita senang. Karena bisa jadi dia sangat berguna, sesuatu ilmu yang ingin kita baca lagi atau menandai suatu titik perubahan dalam hidup kita gitu. Ini sisi emosinya besar banget berarti ya. Sementara kalau yang ketiga, dan ini yang paling susah buat dibuang katanya, adalah buku-buku yang membangkitkan rasa kegembiraan, tapi ya hanya satu atau dua bagian di dalam sana. Dia bicara tentang bagaimana kalau misalnya kita nyimpan quote-quote yang penting itu gitu ya. Tapi ternyata setelah dia simpan dengan dua cara, pertama tulis ulang terlalu banyak kerjaan, sementara kalau pakai tempat fotokopian ternyata dia malah ngerobek bukunya, sayang banget ya. Bukunya dirobek lalu kertasnya di fotokopi terus disimpan lagi ke dalam filenya, tapi setelah bertahun-tahun kemudian dia nggak pernah buka file itu sama sekali. Nah, yang dia temukan adalah setelah kita membuang buku, kita tuh jadi lebih menghargai informasi apa yang ada di dalamnya, impact dari informasi itu. Jadi dan ini pola yang muncul pada klien-klien yang memang membuang buku-buku yang banyak dari koleksi mereka. Yang di bold di sebab ini adalah pada saat kita menemukan suatu buku adalah saat yang tepat untuk mulai membaca buku itu. Dan hal itu tuh hanya bisa kita lakukan kalau kita punya koleksi bukunya ya sedikit, yaitu tadi yang benar-benar membangkitkan rasa gembira atau pleasure gitu dalam diri kita. Nah, sekarang kita kita akan bergerak ke sorting papers. Wah, ini nih halaman ke-72. Ngomong-ngomong, Teteh punya ide Bu untuk untuk pakai background musik nggak apa-apa ya? Coba ya kita cari dulu background musik yang enak. Belakangan saya suka dari YouTube tuh channel Beige Mellow. Ini semacam ini aja sih, instrumental music gitu ya, biar kita bisa ngobrol sambil merasa tenang dan bergembira. Bentar ya, videonya diputar dulu. Terus nanti saya akan share ini. Oke, saya nanti akan share soundnya. Oke, coba kita lihat dari share screen, tapi kita cuma advance dan music or computer sound only, lalu share. Coba diputar. Bu Yanti kedengeran nggak musiknya? Masa? Iya tuh dicoba dulu Bu, biar ketahuan apakah musiknya nggak. Oh, yaudah, oke. Mudah-mudahan nanti pas aku buka live streamnya ketahuan apakah kita sedang mendengarkan musik atau enggak, soalnya di telinga aku sih ya. Ini adalah musik instrumental piano. Oh iya, alhamdulillah. Nah, oh ada Kak Iva. Selamat datang Kak Iva. Ini biar nggak cuma suara saya yang heboh berbicara aja nih yang kedengeran Kak Iva. Oke, kita udah ke yang tadi. Sekarang kita ada di halaman 72 dari buku Marie Kondo yang sama. Kita ngomong tentang sorting papers atau bagaimana kita menyortir kertas. Rule of thumb, discard everything. Buang semuanya, buang semua kertas. Once you've finished organizing your books, it's time to move on to your papers. For example, the letter holder bursting with envelopes that hangs on your wall, the school announcement stuck to your fridge, the unanswered invitation to your school reunion lying by the phone, the newspapers that have accumulated on your table over the last few days. There are several spots within the house where papers tend to pile up like snowdrifts. Ini aku mau lanjut tapi lagunya kok rada-rada sedih gitu ya. Coba pilih lagu dulu deh. Berhubung cuma sedikitan kita, jadi kita lakukan hal yang membuat kita senang. Iklan dulu.
Sun Education Online International Education Expo 2021.
Skip. Nah, ini lumayan lah. Oke, kita kecilin biar kedengarannya kayak background musik aja. Lalu kita lanjut baca. Yay, halaman 72. Although the general assumption is that there are far fewer papers in the home than in an office, this is actually not true. The minimum amount of paper my clients discard or recycle is 2 45-liter bags. The maximum so far is 15 bags. Wow. I don't know how many times I hear my clients' paper shredders jam. It is extremely difficult to manage such a large volume of paper, yet I occasionally meet some amazing clients whose filing skills take my breath away. When I ask how are you managing your papers, their explanations are extremely thorough. Gimana ya? Nanti harus belajar cara spelling thorough gitu ya. Papers related to the children go in this file. That file there is my receipt file. Magazine clippings go in here, and manuals for my electric appliances go in this box. Wow. They have categorized their papers in such fine detail that my mind sometimes wanders off in the middle of their discourse. I confess, I hate filing papers. I never use multiple files or write labels. This system perhaps works better in an office setting where many people use the same documents, but there's absolutely no need to use such a detailed filing system in the home. My basic principle for sorting papers is to throw them all away. My clients are stunned when I say this, but there is nothing more annoying than papers. After all, they will never inspire joy, no matter how carefully you keep them. For this reason, I recommend you dispose of anything that does not fall into one of 3 categories: currently in use, needed for a limited period of time, or must be kept indefinitely. The term papers, by the way, does not include papers with sentimental value like old love letters or diaries. Attempting to sort this will slow down your pace drastically. Limit yourself at first to sorting papers that give you no thrill at all and finish the job in one go. Letters from friends and lovers can be left for when you tackle sentimental items. Once you've gone through those papers that don't evoke any pleasure, what should you do with the ones that you've decided to keep? My filing method is extremely simple. I divide them into two categories. First is papers to be saved, and two is papers that need to be dealt with. Although my policy is to get rid of all papers, these are the only categories I make for those that can't be discarded. Letters requiring a reply, forms that need to be submitted, a newspaper that I intend to read, make a special corner for papers like this that need to be dealt with. Make sure that you keep all such papers in one spot only. Never let them spread to other parts of the house. I recommend using a vertical organizer in which papers can be stored standing up and designating a specific place for it. All papers requiring attention can be placed in there without separating them. As papers that must be saved, these I subdivide according to the frequency of use. Again, the way I divide them is not complicated. I organize them into infrequently used papers and more frequently used papers. Infrequently used papers include insurance policies, guarantees, and leases. Unfortunately, these must be kept automatically regardless of the fact that they spark no particular joy in your heart. As you will almost never need to access papers in this category, you don't have to put a lot of effort into storing them. I recommend putting them all into a single, ordinary, clear plastic folder without worrying about further categorization. The other subcategory consists of papers that we'll take out and look at more frequently, such as outlines of seminars or newspaper clippings. These are meaningless unless they are stored in a way that's easy to access and read, which is why I recommend inserting them into book-like pages of a clear plastic file folder. This category is the trickiest of them all. Although papers like this are not really necessary, they tend to multiply. Reducing the volume of this category is key to organizing your papers. Papers are organized into only three categories: needs attention, should be saved like contractual documents, and should be saved like others. The point is to keep all papers in one category in the same container or folder and to purposely refrain from subdividing them any further by content. In other words, you only need 3 containers or folders. Don't forget that the needs attention box ought to be empty. If there are papers in it, be aware that this means you have left things undone in your life that require your attention. Although I have never managed to completely empty my needs attention box, this is the goal to which we should aspire. Wah, ini jadi ngomongin bagaimana cara kita mestinya bisa menyortir kertas-kertas yang ada di rumah. Siapa yang suka nyortir, suka numpuk kertas? Saya. Kalau dikasih brosur suka susah dibuang. Tapi sebetulnya kertas itu adalah yang paling wajib dibuang karena menurut Marie Kondo itu pada saat melihat kertas itu kita sama sekali tidak merasa gembira. Jadi ada sih kertas-kertas yang perlu dikategorisasikan di tempat lain, kayak surat dari pacar lama, mungkin dari mantan, dari teman-teman yang udah lama di masa kecil kita. Tapi itu adalah untuk kategorisasi di bagian yang sentimental values gitu. Nah, sedangkan yang menurut Marie Kondo ini perlu disimpan, jelas-jelas yang pertama tuh dokumen-dokumen penting kita, kayak asuransi, rumah gitu ya. Tapi kalau misalnya ada yang nggak perlu, itu langsung aja disingkirkan. Lalu ya pokoknya gitulah. Ada juga box yang needs attention. Jadi ini adalah kertas yang nggak bisa kita buang karena masih butuh perhatian kita gitu ya. Misalnya itu adalah form untuk diisi ataupun newspaper yang perlu ditindaklanjuti, mungkin itu adalah bahan research atau apa. Nah itu berarti kalau misalnya box itu masih penuh, itu adalah beban hidup yang masih perlu dikerjakan. Jadi tujuan kita harusnya adalah gimana kita bisa sebisa mungkin mengosongkan isi dari need attention box itu. Menarik sih. Oke, kita tuh masih ada berapa halaman lagi ya tentang papers bla 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 ini. Masih ada sampai halaman 79. Jadi nggak apa-apa lah ya. Malam ini kayaknya baru jam 8:30. Wah, kalau sendirian ternyata waktu berjalan lebih lama. Oke, sekarang kita ada di halaman 74. All about papers. How to organize troublesome papers. My basic policy is to discard all papers, but there are always going to be some that are hard to get rid of. Let's consider here how to tackle these. Lecture materials. Lagi ngomongin tentang bahan-bahan, apa disebutnya lecture-nya? Kuliah ya, bahan kuliah. Those who enjoy studying are quite likely to attend seminars or courses in various subjects such as aromatherapy, logical thinking, or marketing. The recent trend in Japan is to utilize time in the early morning to take seminars. The content and time frame are broadening, giving people a wide choice. For the participants, the materials diligently produced by the lecturer are akin to a badge of honor, and as such, they are hard to part with. But when I visit the homes of these ardent learners, I find that these materials usurp much of the room, making their space oppressive. One of my clients was a woman in her 30s who worked for an advertising company. The moment I entered her room, I felt like I was in an office. My eyes were assaulted by rows of files with carefully printed titles. These are all materials from the seminars I took, she told me. A self-confessed seminar fanatic, she had saved and filed the materials from every seminar she had ever attended. People often insist, I want to restudy these materials sometime, but most never do so. Moreover, the majority of them usually have materials for multiple seminars on same or similar subjects. Why? Because what they learned at the seminars did not stick. I am not saying this as a criticism, but merely to point out why it isn't worth keeping materials from past seminars. If the content is not put into practice, such courses are meaningless. Value begins the moment we start attending, and the key to extracting the full value is putting what we learn there into practice the moment the course ends. Why do people pay expensive fees for such courses when they can read the same content in the book or elsewhere? Because they want to feel the passion of the teacher and experience that learning environment. Thus, the real material is the seminar itself, and it must be experienced live. When you attend a seminar, do so with the resolve to part with every handout distributed. If you regret recycling it, take the same seminar again and this time apply the learning. It's paradoxical, but I believe that precisely because we hang on to such materials, we fail to put what we learn into practice. The biggest collection of seminar materials I have come across so far was 199 files. Needless to say, I had her discard every single one. Jadi bahkan pada saat buku ini ditulis, di Jepang tuh lagi ada tren untuk ikut kayak kursus atau disebutnya apa ya, kuliah umum gitu ya, di mana orang-orang bisa mendaftar dan mengikuti itu. Dan kebanyakan orang pada saat mengikuti kursus semacam itu atau kuliah semacam itu tuh pasti sayang untuk membuang bahan-bahan yang dibagikan di sana. Padahal value dari kursus tuh pada saat itu dilaksanakan secara live, dan pada saat kita mempraktekkan apa yang kita pelajari di sana secara langsung di tempat kita sendiri. Makanya dia menyarankan kita tuh mengikuti sebuah kursus atau sebuah kuliah umum itu dengan memegang prinsip bahwa setiap bahan yang akan dibagikan ke kita itu akan kita buang nantinya. Seperti itulah. Lalu yang kedua tentang credit card statement. Siapa yang surat-surat kartu kreditnya masih ada di rumah? Ini disebutkan karena Bu Yanti gitu. Another thing to discard are all your credit card statements. What is their purpose? For most people, they are simply the means of checking how much money was spent on what during a particular month. So, once you've checked the content to confirm that it's correct and have recorded the figure in your household account book, the statement has fulfilled its purpose and you should discard it. Trust me, you need feel no guilt at all. Can you think of any other time that you would really need your credit card statements? Do you imagine that you might need them for a court case to prove how much was withdrawn? That's not going to happen, so there's no need to treasure these statements for the rest of your life. The same is true for notices of withdrawals from your account to pay utility fees. Be resolute and take this opportunity to get rid of them. Of all my clients, the ones who had the hardest time disposing of papers were a couple, both of whom were lawyers. They kept asking, what if this document is needed in court? At first, they made very little progress, but in the end, even they were able to discard almost all their papers without experiencing any problems. If they can do it, so can you. Jadi ini adalah tentang credit card statement atau mungkin kayak semacam buku tabungan kita yang lama-lama gitu ya, karena kan kita jarang nih, mungkin ada beberapa di antara kita yang nggak punya kartu kredit tapi pasti punya buku tabungan. Pada saat kita sudah mencatat itu, tahu isinya, bahkan sekarang kan ada banyak tempat penyimpanan online gitu ya. Bisa difoto atau di scan atau apapun disimpan di online, mendingan itu dibuang aja. Bukan apa-apa, soalnya memangnya kapan sih kita kira-kira butuh keterangan itu gitu loh. Kecuali kalau itu misalnya hal yang belum selesai ya, kayak cicilan rumah gitu. Kalau itu kan belum selesai jadi nggak apa-apa lah disimpan. Tapi kalau yang lain ya lebih baik dibuang. Kemudian yang terakhir adalah, bukan terakhir sih, masih ada ya. Berikutnya adalah warranties for electrical appliances, atau biasanya kartu garansi untuk barang-barang elektronik kita. Whether a TV or a digital camera, all electrical appliances come with a warranty. This is the most standard document category in any home and the one that almost everyone files and saves properly. The method of organizing, however, is usually almost but not quite right. In general, people save their warranties in clear folder files or accordion-style files. The attraction of these files is that the documents can be stored in separate compartments. However, therein lies their pitfall. Because they are so well divided, it is easy to overlook things. Most people save not only the warranty but also the operation manual in the same file. First, let's start by parting with these manuals. Take a look at them. Have you ever used them? In general, there are only a few manuals that we actually need to read, such as our computer or digital camera manual. And these are so thick that they won't fit in the file anyway. So basically, any manual contained in your warranty folder can be discarded without causing any difficulty. To date, all my clients have discarded most of their manuals, including those for their PCs and cameras, and none of them has experienced any problems from doing so. If they have a problem, they can usually fix it themselves by fiddling with the machine, and they can find solutions for anything they can't figure out on their room from the internet or the place of purchase. So I assure you, you can dispose of them without any qualms. Getting back to warranties, the filing method I recommend is to put them all in a single clear file without separating them into categories. Warranties are only used once a year, if at all. What point is there in carefully sorting and separating them when the odds that they will be needed are so low? Moreover, if you file them in a file folder, you'll have to flip through the pages to find the right warranty. In that case, it's just as easy to keep them all in one file, pull out the entire stack and search through it. If you sort in too much detail, it means you will have fewer opportunities to look at each warranty. Before you realize it, the warranty will be out of date. You have to sift through them all when you need one anyway. This becomes an excellent opportunity to check the expiration dates of your other warranties. This way, you don't have to go to the trouble of deliberately checking the contents just for the expiration dates, and often you don't even have to buy the clear file in which you store the warranties because there's usually at least one already in the house. Finally, this method takes up a tenth of the space of conventional methods. Ini tentang kartu-kartu garansi ya. Padahal kartu garansi kan biasanya ada jangka waktu. Tapi biasanya itu tuh numpuk kelamaan gitu karena kita nggak pernah benar-benar butuh kartu garansi juga gitu kan. Jadinya mendingan dibuang aja. atau kita beresin waktu kita lagi membutuhkan satu kartu garansi gitu ya. Yang perlu dibuang aja tuh yang ini, biasanya buku panduan bagaimana cara mengoperasikan suatu barang elektronik gitu. Wah. Oke. Hari ini kita singkat aja lah, nggak ada Tante Lovely ini. Jadi nggak apa-apa ya Tante Lovely ya. Masih ada beberapa halaman lagi. Sebetulnya pengennya banyak juga sih ya, karena kan kita ini ini baru satu buku kan, belum buku-buku yang lainnya, tapi ya let's go through it one by one. Oke. Sekarang kita ngomongin tentang greeting cards atau kartu ucapan. Biasa kartu yang kita dapat kalau misalnya lagi tahun baru atau lebaran atau kartu undangan mungkin. Nah, in Japan, it is the custom to send New Year's cards to convey New Year's greetings. Many have lottery numbers at the bottom. This means that each card has fulfilled its purpose the moment the receiver finishes reading it. Once you've checked to see whether the numbers on your cards have won anything in the lottery, you can part with the cards with gratitude for conveying to you the consideration of the sender. If you save the cards to confirm the sending address for the following year, then only save 1 year's worth. Dispense with those that are 2 or more years old, except those that spark joy in your heart. Jadi kalau kartu ucapan, kalau di Jepang memang ada kebiasaan untuk ngirim kartu tahun baru, dan itu bentuknya kayak kartu pos. Jadi memang di kartu yang sama pasti ada alamatnya gitu kan. Dan bahkan banyak katanya yang ada nomor undian gitu di bagian bawahnya. Tapi ini tuh udah selesai kegunaannya pada saat kita udah selesai membaca itu. Jadi kalaupun misalnya kita harus nyimpan untuk tahu alamat pengirim, kita simpennya tuh 1 tahun ke belakang aja, jangan disimpan untuk yang kayak 2 tahun lalu atau tahun-tahun sebelumnya, kecuali untuk kartu-kartu ucapan yang benar-benar membuat kita ngerasa senang gitu, ngerasa kita gembira. Oke, berikutnya tentang use checkbooks atau buku cek yang sudah digunakan. Nah, use checkbooks are just that, used. You're not going to look at them again, and even if you do, it won't increase the amount of money in the bank. So really, get rid of them. Katanya kalau buku cek ya udah, kalau udah kepake ya berarti udah kepake gitu kan. Jadi kita nggak akan ngelihat itu lagi, dan kalaupun kita liatin jumlah uang di bank kita nggak akan nambah. Jadi mendingan dibuang katanya. Kemudian yang ketiga, terakhir adalah pay slips. The purpose of your pay slip is to inform you how much you have been paid for this month. Once you've checked the content, its usefulness is over. Jadi kalau pay slips itu memang semacam kalau misalnya kita dapat honor terus dapat itunya kan ya, tanda bukti gaji gitu ya, slip gaji. Jadi kalau misalnya itu udah dibuang aja. Yang menarik lagi, di setiap rumah di Jepang itu biasanya ada paper shredder. Jadi ada bukan cuma ada printer, tapi ada buat apa disebutnya ya, perobek kertas gitu, tahu kan mesin-mesin yang di perkantoran. Nah, kayaknya kita juga perlu itu deh, karena selama ini di beberapa kertas-kertas penting itu kan pasti ada informasi pribadi ya di dalamnya ya, entah itu alamat atau nomor telepon atau apapun. Dan kalau ngerobek satu-satu kan susah, jadi mendingan pakai paper shredder aja. Jadi pas kita buang itu udah berbentuk kertas-kertas chip kecil gitu. Belum jam 9, jadi saya lanjutin. Yang berikutnya adalah tentang komono atau miscellaneous items. Jadi barang-barang yang beraneka ragam. Nah, prinsipnya di sini adalah keep things because you love them, not just because. Jadi simpanlah barang-barang yang betul-betul kita cintai, kita sayangi, bukan cuma barang-barang yang kalau ditanya kenapa disimpan ya gitu aja gitu. Ya emang nggak boleh. Kalau kayak gitu alasannya mendingan buang katanya. Jadi ini di halaman 78. I pull out a drawer in a client's home and discover a strange little box, just waiting to be opened like a tantalizing book that promises some fascinating tale. But for me, there is no excitement whatsoever. I know exactly what I'll find inside. Loose change, hairpins, erasers, spare buttons, wristwatch parts, batteries that may or may not be dead, leftover medicine, lucky charms, key rings, and the list goes on and on and on. I already know what the client's answer will be if I ask why these things are in that box. Just because. Many items within the home are treated the same way. They are placed, stored, and accumulate just because, without our giving them much thought. I call this category komono, a Japanese term that the dictionary defines variously as small articles, miscellaneous items, accessories, gadgets or small tools, parts or attachments, an insignificant person or small fry. It's no wonder people don't know what to do with things that fall into such a vague and all-encompassing category. Still, it's time to be very well to this just because approach. These items play an important part in supporting your lifestyle and therefore they too deserve to be handled one by one and sorted properly. Unlike clothes or books, this category includes a diverse range of items and the thought of trying to sort and organize them may seem daunting. If you deal with them in the proper order, however, this task is actually quite simple. The basic order for sorting komono is as follows. First, CDs and DVDs. 2. Skincare products. 3. Makeup. 4. Accessories. 5. Valuables like passports or credit cards or debit cards, etc. And then 6. Electrical equipments and appliances like digital camera, electric cords, anything that seems vaguely electric. 7. Household equipment such as stationery and writing materials, sewing kits, etc. And 8. Household supplies, expendables like medicine, detergents, tissues, etc. And then 9. Kitchen goods or food supplies like spatulas, pots, blenders, etc. And then 10. Others like spare change, figurines, etc. If you have many items related to a particular interest or hobby, such as ski equipment or ceremony articles, treat these as a single subcategory. I recommend this particular order because it is easier if you start with more personal items and clearly define content first. If you live alone, you don't really need to worry about the order as long as you do one subcategory at a time. Too many people live surrounded by things they don't need just because. I urge you to take stock of your komono and save only, and I mean only, those that bring you joy. Gitu. Jadi ceritanya ini adalah ngeberesin barang-barang perintilan yang ada di rumah gitu ya. Dia menyarankan bahwa kategorinya kita bagi aja. Jadi yang pertama tentang CD dengan DVD, yang kedua skincare, yang ketiga make up, 4 aksesori, 5 barang-barang berharga kayak pasport, credit card, mungkin buku tabungan, apapun gitu ya. Yang keenam, electrical equipments and appliances kayak kamera digital, kabel-kabelan, apapun yang kayaknya tuh nyerempet elektronik, benda-benda elektronik. Yang ketujuh itu peralatan rumah tangga yang biasa kita simpen. Misalnya alat-alat tulis atau alat jahit dan sebagainya. Terus yang kedelapan, household supplies yang suka habis gitu ya, kayak sabun-sabunan, obat-obatan, tisu, dan yang lainnya. Yang kesembilan, peralatan dapur atau makanan kayak spatula mungkin, atau panci, atau blender, atau apapun. Terus yang ke-10 itu benda-benda lainnya, misalnya uang recehan, uang kembalian gitu ya, figurin atau yang lainnya. Nah, dia juga menyarankan kalau misalnya ada yang berkaitan dengan hobi kita, entah itu misalnya ski equipment or ceremony articles. Jadi mungkin kita hobi ada pesta teh gitu. Kalau di Jepang kan memang ada upacara minum teh ya. Atau mungkin kita suka ski atau olahraga tertentu, kita perlu mengkategorikan ini sebagai satu subkategori buat kita sendiri. Menarik ya, buat orang Jepang tuh ternyata buku tuh satu kategori besar dan bukan termasuk dalam hobi gitu. Karena kan kalau kita kayaknya membaca buku itu suatu hobi dan bukan berarti belum tentu satu anak muda tuh bisa punya banyak buku gitu ya di tempatnya, tapi ternyata keren sih. Oke, sekarang kita ke halaman 80, Common Types of Komono. Yang pertama, disposables. A surprising number of things are instantly identifiable as disposable without even asking. Does this spark joy? I have already pointed out how important it is to relinquish the things that you find it hard to part with. It is equally important when putting your house in order to actually notice the things you have kept for no particular reason. The majority of people are surprisingly unaware of the odds and ends taking up space in their homes. Jadi yang pertama, ini lagi ngomongin apa yang kita perlu buang. Bahkan kita tuh bisa gitu langsung mengenali sesuatu yang perlu kita buang, bahkan sebelum kita tuh nanya apakah benda ini tuh akan membangkitkan kegembiraan dari kita atau enggak gitu kan ya. Tuh. Jadi yang pertama adalah gifts atau hadiah. A plate received as a wedding favor that still sits in its box on top of the china cabinet. A key holder you receive as a souvenir from a friend that now lies in your drawer. A set of peculiar smelling incense presented to you by your colleagues on your birthday. What do these items all have in common? They were gifts. Someone important to you used precious time to pick them out and buy them for you. They are an expression of love and consideration. You can't just throw them away, right? But let's consider this more carefully. Most of the gifts remain unopened or have been used only once. Admit it, they simply don't suit your taste. The true purpose of a present is to be received. Presents are not things, but a means to conveying someone's feelings. When viewed from this perspective, you don't need to feel guilty for parting with a gift. Just thank it for the joy it gave you when you first received it. Of course, it would be ideal if you could use it with joy, but surely the person who gave it to you doesn't want you to use it out of a sense of obligation or to put it away without using it, only to feel guilty every time you see it. When you discard or donate it, you do so for the sake of the giver too. Ini menarik banget ya. Konsep bahwa hadiah tuh buat kita bukan cuma bendanya, tapi pada saat orang menghadiahkan sesuatu untuk kita itu adalah cara untuk menyampaikan apa yang mereka rasakan. Jadi pada saat kita mendonasikan barang itu karena kita mungkin gak butuh atau cuma pakai sekali atau bukan selera kita aja, itu kita juga sedang melakukan itu demi si pemberi juga gitu. Jadi gak usah khawatir kalau misalnya kita mau memberikan barang tersebut pada orang lain, walaupun itu misalnya hadiah doang. Kok hadiah? Justru adalah hadiah ya. Oke. Yang kedua, cosmetic samples saved for trips. Well, do you have a collection of cosmetic samples that have been hanging around for a year or more unused? Many people keep these to use on trips but then never seem to take them when they travel. I contacted various manufacturers to inquire about the shelf life of these products. The answers were varied. Some only last a few weeks, while others are good for a year. When the quantity is very small, such as samples, the quality deteriorates faster. To use possibly outdated cosmetics, especially when you are supposed to be enjoying your travels, seems rather foolhardy. Ini kayak kita kan suka dapat sampel-sampel kosmetik gitu, dan itu biasanya travel size gitu kan buat kita pakai di perjalanan. Tapi kalau misalnya itu usianya udah lebih dari setahun, sebenarnya mereka udah kadaluarsa kalau menurut produsennya, menurut manufacturernya. Jadi mendingan barang-barang seperti ini kalau misalnya kita memang nggak pakai, dibuang atau dikasihin aja. Okay, then electronic package. Ini aku merasa bersalah karena memang seneng nyimpen yang kayak gini nih. Boxes are surprisingly bulky. Discard or recycle the box your cell phone comes in as soon as you unpack it. You don't need a manual or the CD that comes with it either. You'll figure out the applications you need through using it. All of my clients have discarded these things, yet none of them has ever been inconvenienced by their absence. If you do have a problem, you can always get help from the internet or the clerk at the shop where you bought it. It is far quicker to ask a pro for the answer than to struggle to find one in the manual by yourself. Some people save the boxes for electrical appliances because they think they can get more money for the appliances if they ever sell them. This, however, is a waste. If you consider the rent or mortgage you pay, turning your space into a storage shed for empty boxes costs you more than what you could earn selling an appliance in a box. You don't need to keep them for moving either. You can worry about finding suitable boxes when the time comes. It's a shame to let a boring box take up the room in your house just because you might need it someday. Jadi siapa ini yang suka nyimpen kotak-kotak yang dus-dus yang datang kalau misalnya kita beli barang? Katanya begitu itu datang langsung aja kita buang atau kita recycle, karena ya gitu kita bisa jadi nggak akan butuh itu. Kalaupun suatu saat kita butuh untuk nyimpen barang, kita pasti akan nemuin kardus-kardus yang kita butuhin gitu, bahkan mungkin bisa beli baru, dan itu kan cenderung murah ya, jadi kita nggak akan butuh gitu benda-benda ini. Oke. Kemudian unidentified cords atau kabel-kabel yang tidak bisa kita kita identifikasi. If you see a cord and wonder what on earth it's for, chances are you'll never use it again. Mysterious cords will always remain just that, a mystery. Are you worried you might need it if something breaks? Don't be. I have seen countless homes with duplicates of the same type of cord, but a tangle of cords just makes it harder to find the right one. In the end, it is quicker to buy a new one. Keep only those cords that you can clearly identify and get rid of the rest. Your collection most likely contains quite a few that belong to defunct machines you have long since discarded. Jadi kalau ada kabel misterius di rumah, itu tuh bakalan stay like that, misteri. nggak akan ketahuan itu buat apa. Jadi kalau misalnya kita menemukan ada kabel-kabel di rumah yang tidak bisa kita identifikasi untuk apa, mendingan dibuang aja, karena kemungkinan itu adalah bagian dari perlengkapan yang udah lama rusak, udah lama nggak kita pakai gitu. Jadi nggak akan dipakai juga. Simpan aja kabel-kabel yang memang kita tuh tahu, oh ini tuh buat ini gitu kan, barang-barang ini tuh masih dipakai kayak gitu. Okay, the next one is broken appliances. I often come across broken TVs and radios in my clients' homes. Obviously, there is no need to keep these. If you too have broken appliances, see this as an opportunity to contact your local recycler and get rid of them. Jadi kalau misalnya ada barang elektronik yang rusak, itu kita nggak perlu simpan, buang aja. Yang menarik di sana, mereka tuh ada local recycler. Jadi orang yang mendaur ulang tapi tinggalnya di daerah sekitar mereka gitu kan. Ya hubungi aja gitu, terus buang. Kemudian ini adalah bedding for the guest who never comes. Quilts, pillows, blankets, sheets, spare sets of bedding take up a lot of room. This is another common items that gets discarded during my lessons, and again, my clients rarely miss it. Although it's worth having spare bedding if you have regular guests, it's unnecessary to keep extra sets if you only have overnight visitors, at most once or twice a year. Bedding stored indefinitely in the closet often smells so mildewed you wouldn't want to let your guests use it anyway. Take a whiff, see for yourself. Katanya coba endus deh bau barang-barang yang kita simpen itu buat kasur atau bantal atau guling kalau misalnya ada yang nginep di tempat kita. Kayaknya itu bakalan apek banget sampai nggak cocok gitu untuk disajikan ke tamu-tamu penting, misalnya bakalan nginep di rumah. Jadi kalau misalnya ada yang kayak gini, mendingan dibuang kalau misalnya nggak dipakai. Dibuang tuh gini, soalnya kalau di Jepang pembuangan sampah tuh nggak kayak kita ya, yang segala kotor gitu. Kan mereka ada hari-harinya tuh, kayak kalau hari ini mungkin barang-barang yang bisa dibakar, hari besok yang nggak bisa dibakar, hari berikutnya barang-barang yang besar-besar. Nah, jadi pada saat kita buang, biasanya tuh ada pihak-pihak yang bisa entah itu mendaur ulang atau menyimpan atau justru ngambil gitu kan, sengaja nyari dari tukang loak gitu loh untuk ngambilnya. Nah, makanya ya kalau misalnya kita nggak butuh ya antara dikasihin ke orang lain atau kita kasih ke tukang loak aja deh gitu. Nanti mereka pasti bisa menemukan orang yang akan lebih membutuhkan. Nah, kemudian spare buttons. You will never use spare buttons. In most cases, when a button falls off, it's a sign that the particular shirt or blouse has been well worn and loved and has now reached the end of its life. For coats and jackets that you want to keep for a long time, I recommend sewing spare buttons to the lining when you first buy them. For other clothes, if you lose a button and really want to replace it, you can always get what you need at a large handicrafts shop. From my work in the field, I have come to the conclusion that when a button falls off, people often don't bother to sew another one on even when they have kept the spares. Instead, they either keep wearing the outfit without a button or leave it lying around somewhere in their wardrobe. If you're not going to use spare buttons anyway, it shouldn't matter that you get rid of them. Ini adalah tentang kancing cadangan. Jadi kalau misalnya kita punya baju-baju bagus yang kayak jas atau apa gitu ya, yang bakalan kita pakai dalam waktu lama, mendingan kancing cadangan tuh dijahit ke bagian dalamnya supaya kalau misalnya kita butuh bisa dipakai. Tapi kalau untuk baju-baju biasanya itu adalah baju-baju yang udah sangat sering kita pakai, udah lama kita sayang, dan sekarang udah mencapai akhir dari masa pengabdiannya untuk kita gitu ya. Jadi biasanya kita tuh nggak akan gitu menggunakan kancing-kancing cadangan ini. Jadi kalau misalnya ditemukan ya anggap aja sampah gitu kan, nggak apa-apa, dibuang aja. Kemudian ada products from the latest health craze. Slimming belts, glass bottles for making kefir, a special blender for making tofu, a weight loss machine that mimics the movement of horseback riding, It seems a ways to get rid of expensive items like these that you bought by mail order but never fully used. Believe me, I can relate. But you can't let them go. The exhilaration you felt when you bought them is what counts. Express your appreciation for their contribution to your life by telling them, "Thank you for the boost you gave me when I bought you," or "Thank you for helping me get a little more fit." Then, discard them with the conviction that you are healthier for having bought them. Jadi kadang kita untuk dengan tujuan bisa jadi lebih sehat gitu, kita bakalan beli barang-barang sesuatu yang mungkin sebenarnya nggak sesering itu kita gunakan gitu kan. Dan ya kita bilang aja makasih gitu kan, udah ngebantu kita lebih fit saat itu ini walaupun bukan berkelanjutan, atau terima kasih karena kamu memberikan aku boost gitu, mungkin booster semangat pada saat aku membeli kamu gitu kan. Setelah itu baru kita singkirkan dari rumah. Nah, berikutnya free novelty goods. A cell phone screen cleaner that came with a soda bottle, a ball pen engraved with your school's name, a paper fan you got at an event, a set of plastic cups won at a fair, glasses bearing a beer company's logo, post-it stamped with a pharmaceutical company's name, a folder with just 5 sheets of blotting paper, a promotional calendar still in its tube, a pocket calendar unused even 6 months into a year. None of these are going to bring you any pleasure. Discard or recycle them without any qualms. Ini tuh barang-barang yang biasanya tuh dapat sebagai bonusan. Misalnya screen cleaner buat apa ya, buat layar HP gitu kan, atau pulpen yang mungkin pulpen event gitu kan. Habis kita dari acara itu ada pulpennya, atau mungkin kipas yang kita dapat dari event itu biasanya ini nggak akan membuat kita seneng kalaupun ada di rumah. Jadi lebih baik di get rid aja gitu. Padahal di rumah ini banyak banget ya, ini gelas-gelas yang sebetulnya isinya dari event-event kayak gitu. Oke, sekarang di halaman 84 ini ada subbab yang lain tentang small change. Terus habis itu ada sentimental items. Habis itu ada photos, kemudian astounding stockpiles I have seen. Reduce, follow. Oke, jadi bab ketiga ini selesai di halaman ke-93. Tapi sekarang kita ada di halaman 84. Jadi pas banget 10 halaman. Karena udah jam 9, gimana? Gak apa-apa ya, kita hentikan aja. Makasih untuk yang sudah mengikuti ocehan saya. Semoga nggak terlalu bosen dengan adanya musik-musik ini. Kita akan ketemu di hari Selasa minggu depan untuk belajar lebih banyak dari sini. Mungkin mulai bisa disiapkan juga kalau misalnya ada buku atau apapun yang ingin dibahas lebih lanjut di sini. Saya ada sih beberapa, mungkin lebih menyenangkan untuk diskusi. Tapi kalau misalnya nggak ada, nggak apa-apa juga. Sampai ketemu minggu depan. Semoga yang disampaikan hari ini bermanfaat. Makasih Ibu sudah menemani Teteh. Makasih juga Kak Ifah yang tadi sudah hadir menemani beberapa kali. Maaf ya kalau gak banyak disapa karena lagi membaca ceritanya. Mudah-mudahan kebaca buku-bukunya. Dan sampai jumpa lagi minggu depan. Assalamualaikum, Rahayu. Semoga sehat selalu. Salam tangguh.